Alright, so we're going to continue Hilchos Niddah Siman Kuf Peiches Dinei Marot Adam. This Siman deals with colors. It's an interesting Siman, because colors is an interesting subject. It's difficult and it's easy. It's difficult because this is one of those Simanim or one of those halachas that requires as much shimush as possible. Shimush means training with a rabbi who has experience in this area. There are some rabbis where I guess women consult with more regularly about this kinds of issues, kind of halachas, and over the years they of course acquire experience. Experience is very important and especially in this area of colors. We're dealing with blood, and blood is not always red, and that's really part of the question here. Is it really blood then? What kind of shade does it have to be for it to be tameh or tahor? So even though there are certain rules and certain guidelines that we will learn from halacha, nevertheless there are some times at least that one may have some doubts, and it's always best of course to consult, never in doubt, with someone who has that experience. So in some ways I say it's easy because it's, colors are either red, black, white, green, yellow, and so forth. On the other hand, it's about experience. It's about understanding what we're looking at. So perhaps I'll give you a little bit of a background, a little bit of an introduction as the sugya of dam, of colors of dam. In Gemara, we learn out from the pasuk that there is dam tohor and dam tomeh. There is something called dam that is unclean and dam that is clean. Because the pasuk says words as follows: Ki poleh mimichot davar lamishpat ben dam ledam. In other words, apparently, the Chachamim understood from the wording of the pasuk, that whenever we have a doubt, when something is concealed from us, when we're not sure about the din, the halacha, of a particular subject matter, or ben dam nedam, kinds of dam, different kinds of blood, whether this is dam is clean or not, then we need to ask the right authorities. We may need to go to the Sanhedrin for certain. So we see from the wording that there is a distinction made. There's an emphasis of different kinds of damim. Well, what that means is that sometimes dam is rendered, is considered tameh, and sometimes it's not, depending, of course, where it comes from. That we already have an idea by now. Obviously, if it's not from the makor, it's not something that we need to be considered. It's an injury. We know for sure it's an injury, and it's not in the makor. In other words, it's an injury in a spot where we for sure have no doubts that it's not dam niddah. And even though it's red, it's still not going to be tameh, just because it's blood. It looks like blood. It behaves like blood. So that we know so far, that in order for dam to be considered dam niddah, we need to know where it came from. Of course, there's differences between dam that comes out versus a dam that is a ketem, a stain, which we haven't really covered yet. Right now, let's assume we're dealing with the real thing. In other words, dam coming from the real air, from the real makor, from the real place of which can render it tameh. The only issue would be coloration right now, because coloration, even though it's coming from that area, could make a difference too. So from the Gemara, we see so far that sometimes, at least, we need to evaluate to determine if what we're looking at is dam or not. Because if this liquid that came out from the makor, from that general area, is clean or not. And pretty much the consensus is that all dam that resembles various shades of red, we're going to be machmer, we're going to be strict, we're going to consider it tameh, except for black. Black is tameh, but even though it's not a shade of red, because the general understanding of what black is red that's somehow spoiled, red that something happened to it. In other words, in its original state it was red and it has turned black. So I'm not sure how to say it in English. It's red sheloko, that's the lashon of the Chachamim. Loko meaning that it somehow lost its redness, lost its original coloration, or hue, H-U, and somehow through saturation, if you want to use that word, of other liquids of the body or something in the body of the woman, caused that redness to turn black. If you look at the Mishnah there that brings this halacha down, you will see that there is there are some additional names of colors that resemble red. One of them is karkum, like the flowers or the petals of the saffron plant, which is very much the crimson color, or is close to red. There is a color there that is like meimei adomo, like water that is in earth, and it's talking about a certain earth that was reddish, that gave a different shade of red, but not exactly red like blood. And that would be tummy as well. Or you have like something which has been diluted. Imagine like a wine that's been diluted. It's a rosé, is that what they call it? Something that is of a lighter shade and nonetheless leaning towards redness. So from the word domeho, which is another pasuk, her blood in plural, the Chachamim learn that 5 types of blood, color, are tmeim. 4, we realize 4 are midoraisa. 4 different kinds of red. The question is if black is doraisa or is only the Rabbanan. Quite a few Rishonim seem to say that black is also one. It's a 5th one. But the Gemara said 4. No, well, the 5th one is really one of the 4, but it became black. In other words, black is really red that became black. So we don't. In other words, it is included in what the Torah meant by domeho. Domeho in the plural means if she has blood coming out of her, and it says domeho twice, so domeho 2 plus domeho 2, that's 4. And black means it was red, but it turned now black. Fine, so we have 5 types that are Tomei Midoraisa, and anything that's not that apparently is nothing that we have to be concerned with. But it's not so simple, because if you know a little bit about colors, you know there's something called primary colors. And with the primary colors, which are red, green, and blue, you can produce any color you want if you know how to mix them, right? That's how you get, if you mix, for example, if you mix red and green, you get yellow. What? Blue and yellow, you get green. Exactly. It could work the other way around, right? You can get black, you can get white, you can get brown. And brown is important because we'll be talking about what the status of brown is. So we see from the various colors, whether it's additive or subtractive coloration in creating paints. And it's a whole subject of how to subtract a color. So in other words, create a certain dye. In other words, by adding another color pigment, you're basically removing a certain wavelength, if you want to really be descriptive here, of a color, and what you see is what is being reflected is what has remained after what has been subtracted. But anyway, there's different ways of producing color. And color is something fascinating, how the eye perceives it, differentiates it, and some people are colorblind, which leads us to the next point. The Chachamim, of course, were experts. Nonetheless, we find that many Amoraim, later on, we had the Tanoim, then we had the Amoraim, we find that many of them, even though they were experts and they were familiar and they were knowledgeable in all the fields of halacha, they somehow were reluctant, if I can use that word, to decide on colors if this is tameh or tahor. Why? Because sometimes it was difficult to make that determination. Even though I said earlier it's easy, but it's not so easy. Sometimes it's difficult to what color is this? Is it leaning towards red? Because if it's leaning toward red, we already have, by all indications, the halacha leaning towards red. And today we're makpid in all shades. We're not going to say, well, this is this is that, because the halacha is that today we're not biki at all. We're not experts as they were in the past. And as a result of that, any shade, red, anything resembles red, usually pretty much is tameh. In other words, if back then they were reluctant to make a decision distinguishing the fine shades of red, who are we to say, well, this is not exactly one of the 4? Because basically you have 4 plus black. But there are more than 4 shades. I mean, there's a lot of shades. So there's burgundy, that's a kind of red too. Purple. Yeah? Not that you're going to encounter these kind of colors, right? But there's all kinds of shades because there's all kinds of liquids coming out of the body too. That sometimes gets in the way. Is this blood perhaps mixed with something else? And as a result of that, maybe I should wait until it dries. Or should I see it when it's fresh? And how about the kind of lighting I should use? Does it make a difference, fluorescent or incandescent? What about if I want to look at it at night? She needs to know right away. So these are some of the reasons why it's not so simple, in which we'll talk a little bit about it, what's the ideal way to check. But these are some of the issues, some of the questions, and some of the uncertainties that can apply to looking at a stain or at the blood coming out right now. Stain, in other words, that she found on her beged, or when she checked herself. Even if she felt something coming out, we know where it's coming from. She's feeling it. Nonetheless, why should we send her to the mikveh? Why should we make her tameya if this is not really blood? I mean, this is an area where one who's making the decision has to be careful not to unnecessarily render her tameya, and of course to be careful not to say that it's nothing. It is blood. So therefore, the Rosh says that if back then they were not so eager, they were not always so sure about the various shades, and not everyone was an expert, not everyone took it upon himself to determine if a particular dam was Tomeh or Tor, the Rosh says, this is the Rosh. Rosh is a Rishon. Even in our time, in our generation, that we're less experts and have less of an idea or less expertise in this area. Anything that closely resembles any shade of red is Tomeh. If something is pretty much white or green, you can rest assured that it's clean. Beis Yosef says, and that same applies to any other color that is totally not red, that you know for sure it's not red, that you can be makel. And we will see it inside. Even though the Mechaber and the Tur do not mention every possible color, like gray and pink, the Poskim do, the Achronim do. And we'll go through each one of them. Alright, so let's read it inside. Kol mareh adom, ben im hi keha, harbe o amok tmeim. Now, here there's an interesting word that you may come across. Hebrew literature, let's call it, Judaic literature, that is exact opposite of modern Hebrew use. Keha. Today in Hebrew, in Israel, if you say atzeva ze kehe, what are we saying? We're saying that this shade of color is a darker shade. If you want to say lighter shade, you use the Hebrew word today, bahir. That's modern Hebrew usage. In the past, and what's interesting about it is because these are terms that are used with negoim. When we read about sarat, soon, in Sefer Vayikra, leprosy, it talks about colors too. Did the color become darker or lighter? Right? So here, the word keheh does not mean darker. It means lighter. The exact opposite. It lost its darkness. And the word amok, deep, means dark. So something that is dark is amok.
It meant both dark.
What, the word amok?
Yes.
No, amok is darker. Instead of, for us, kehe is darker.
Yeah.
This language, amok means darker.
But for us, amok means deep.
We don't use amok unless we say the word deep, but not for colors.
So I'm saying, and they used well also, or only?
Yeah, they did. Yeah. The color became darker, they said amok. There may be other terms, I don't recall right now, but that's what the Mechaber is using it. So, kol mareh adom, benim hi keha, harbe, or amok, whether it's light or whether it's deep, temeim, they're unclean. V'chein kol mareh shachor, so far he says, and same thing with any hue or shade of black. Okay, so far fine. Ve'en tahor, the only one that's clean, ela mareh lavan, white, clear. He doesn't talk about gray, doesn't talk about brown, but what about green, yellow, and blue? Well, those he mentions. He says, besides the white, v'chen mar'eh yarok. Green as well is clean, is not a problem. Afilu kemar'eh ha'sha'ava o hazahav, v'chol sheken yarok kekarti o ke'asavim. Even if this yarok, now what's yarok? Here's another one of those Hebrew words that in the past meant something else, and or it was more general. Today, yarok means green. You want to say yellow, you say tzahov. In those days, yarok could mean either one of the two, green or yellow. And whenever you wanted to say green, you said green like the grass. Otherwise, they would think you're saying yellow like an etrog, like an etrog that we know. So he says like this. Same thing with the color of yarok, green, yellow, whatever. Afilu kemare, even if this yarok is kemare shava, like sha'ava, like wax, or zahav, or gold. In other words, sha'ava, I guess, is a little bit more pale. And sha'ava, of course, doesn't only mean sha'ava. It could mean yellow like the egg yolk, as the shach brings them, or a trog. So it's a form of yellow. Or gold. V'chol sheken, he says, hayarok kekarti o ka'asavim. The more so if it's green like leeks, which is a light green, or dark green, ka'asavim. Now, the question is, why don't you just include them all together? Why does he have to say first, only one that's green for sure is Mare Lavan? Then he says, but by the way, the same applies to green and yellow. Because obviously there are some opinions that yellow was not so simple. Yellow perhaps had a little bit of a tinge of redness in it. And therefore, even though we know what the halacha is, perhaps that is why Basar or the Shuchan Aruch here is separating the two, because you should notice there is a discussion about those colors. Green, apparently there's a consensus, no problem. Yellow could be an issue. And it's even an issue today sometimes. You have to look a little bit more careful with yellow, especially depending on the shade of yellow. Because, for example, let's say you see orange. Let's talk about orange. He doesn't say orange. What do you do with orange? What's orange? It's yellow and red. Right? So perhaps it's already something that's closer to red than it is to yellow. So with orange is one of those shades or one of those colors that you have to look very, very closely. And it may require more analysis on the different lighting conditions. You may want to see it at the first moment and then see it a little bit later. That's not always done, but sometimes that may be necessary. See if the colors change, which we'll be talking about soon. What happened if the color changed? It was one thing when the woman first saw it, and then it changed. We'll talk about that. But usually, you see it right away, and you want to see it right away. You don't want to wait too long. So with orange, the poskim say that you want to look at it a little bit closer to see. Then the Ramo adds, "B'chen mar'eh shekorim b'lashon acher blu b'chlal yarok hu." It's added here in parentheses. I don't know what the source is, but anyway, it's added here that even if it's blue is like green, and therefore it's no problem. Maybe we should just continue reading it, and then we'll go back and explain it. The Mechaber adds, even if it's very thick, it's a very thick liquid, makes no difference. If it's a color that is tahor, it's tahor. Even though it's thick. I think there's another word in English for samich. Dense. Samich. When something is viscous. Exactly. I think that's the word. Viscous. When you really, it's not just liquid. Viscous. Yeah, maybe that's the word. Used. I think thickness. Yeah, that's what I thought of. Yeah. So afilu yesh bo smichut dam. It's the viscosity of blood, right? V'hu avar be, very thick. Afilu hirgisha sheniftach mekora. Even though she felt that her womb opened, but kamiyad, and she checked right away. And this is, by the way, a very important thing which eventually we'll talk about it later on another siman. That if a woman feels something opening, something coming out of her, she should check herself right away. Because if she does not, even though she checks later, it could be that later it's gone. And she was Tmeya. And we're not going to be lenient with that. Oh, but I don't see anything now. Well, that's because you checked several hours later. So it is important, if she does have a sensation of liquid coming down her body from the womb, that she should check herself. So that's what he says. Afilu hirgisha, even if she fell, she niftar mekora ubat kamiyad, and she checked herself right away. Umatz'a marot halalu, and she found these colors that are clean colors, tehora. In other words, meaning even if she felt it coming from there, so what? Who says it's going to have to be blood coming from there? There are other liquids. A woman does, and a man does too, have various kinds of liquids in the body that can come out. And if she checked herself right away and she found these colors, even though she was feeling something coming out of her, she's still clean. V'chen ikar, the Rama adds, that's the halacha. The loki ish machmerin metameh, not like those who want to be strict and make her tameh, tmeya. Im yesh bo smichut v'uav, if in fact it is thick. V'mirgisha sheniftach mekorav bat kam miyad v'lo matza klum. That's another halacha. He says if she did feel something coming out and she checked herself and she didn't find anything, ayin lekamon siman kuf tzadik, as I mentioned, that is something that's discussed later on. What happens if something is coming out, she checks herself, and she doesn't see anything? What is that supposed to be? Okay, we'll get to that later on. Alright, so going back to colors. So far we know that any kind of shade of red can be a problem, whether it's a ketem, whether it's actual blood coming out. Just that in ketem there's different halachas. Stains are midrabanan, and we deal with it separately in a totally different way. But with blood, we're going to be machmir. Black, many times we're going to be machmir, except that I think the Shevet HaLevi, Rabbi Vosner, brings down, I believe, in his Sefer, that from his experience, for those who he's worked with, many times when a woman sees all kinds of black residue, whatever you want to call it, coming out, when she, or not coming out necessarily, even when she checks herself with the cotton, how do you call it in English? The cotton wad, or with the cloth, yeah, and she sees all kinds of black. It's many times it's not blood. So even though here we're learning that black, a kind of red blood, nonetheless it requires experience too. That's why experience can make a world of a difference. If the chacham who's checking tells you, well, this is nothing, this is dirt. Many times it's leftover dirt from something else that she didn't clean her. And this is critical at a stage called hefsek tahara. Hefsek tahara is the time where she's going from the 4 or 5 unclean days when she actually saw blood, and she's about to do her shiva nekiyim, clean days, spotless. So before she goes to that stage, the blood stopped, she has to check herself one last time before sunset, because after sunset, if she's clean, after sunset she begins her first of 7 days, after which she goes to the mikveh. And imagine she's not clean after sunset. She lost 1 day, right? She can't start the 7 clean days until she's clean. But what if that unclean that she thinks she is, the text, is not blood? And I've seen this happen. I mean, it's quite common. Sometimes, oh, but what's this? Well, this is not blood. So this requires experience. This requires analysis. More blood that she, or perhaps this is just dirt. Perhaps this is not related to her period. So Baruch Hashem, you don't have to worry about this. The women do, right? But as husbands, of course, needs to be aware of that. A woman has to be aware that she should check herself on time. There's something called moch dachuk, which we'll talk about. That a woman, even though she didn't do it, lechatchila, she should insert inside her body a little bit before sunset. It should stay there. Like this, she can be more sure if in fact it's clean or not. She removes it and looks at it, as opposed to just checking herself. Maybe she didn't check herself properly. She's supposed to clean herself before. Yeah. So there's different halachas, of course, on how to check yourself, during the 7 clean days, how many times to check yourself, what kind of clothing to wear, the white clothing to wear during the 7 days, all in order to ascertain she's in fact clean. So if a woman has not cleansed her, she's not, the hygiene-wise, is not very, very clean, she could complicate matters. The cleaner she is, obviously the less issues there will be. Yes. Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about now. So far we saw it from the Mechaber that green and yellow should not be a problem, and neither be blue. Orange, we said, appears to be that it may have a leaning towards redness, so one has to check it. Orange is not red. And as far as we know, if it's not red, then it's not red. It's just another color, but it's not a problem color. But experience has shown that it perhaps it may be close to red, and therefore it requires further investigation, further analysis. Now comes brown. Brown, I always remember when I was learning Hilchas Niddah, that brown was a machlokas. It was a machlokas, poskim. What's the status of brown? Now, even though you may find that the Badei HaShulchan is lenient with brown, is because, if you're going to be so strict about brown and all these similar colors, then we may have a very difficult time. Because I don't know for sure if that's the approach that one should take with brown, because even though the Aruch HaShulchan is also lenient, and there are quite a few poskim that are lenient, brown is not a simple matter to be lenient with. I would tend to be more careful with brown than with others. And I think the general consensus today, if I'm not mistaken, I haven't asked around, but that we're stricter with brown than with other colors. Other colors, we understand that there's no problem. Green, yellow, blue, and so forth. But brown is getting close to black. Brown has hints of red. Plus, in my humble opinion, this is just my own opinion, it may not be exactly 100% accurate, my understanding from the Mishnah describes the various colorations of saffron and other kinds of liquids there that have different kinds of shades of red, even though they're all in the red family, okay? That appears to be the case. I mean, otherwise somebody would say something about it. Nonetheless, it appears to me that some of those colors, or at least one of them, the one that's muddled with water, muddled with earth, may resemble brown. Now, even in brown, two shades that the poskim talk about. Is it brown like coffee, or brown like something else? In other words, what kind of brown is it? So, the Mishnah did say something about muddled in earth. Now, even though that muddled in earth is, some say, is reddish earth, as you know, there is a reddish kind of earth, and therefore what we're seeing is all kinds of red, dark, and shades, and hues, and so forth. Nonetheless, it could be that brown, may be, depending on the type of brown, something similar to that. So, you will find that some poskim make a compromise. That it all depends when she sees. Is this during the hefsek tahara? Is this a ketem, a stain? In other words, or is she really having a hard time becoming clean? She's always seeing brown liquid a lot of times. Obviously, there are times that we are lenient. And we say, you know what, it could be that this is something else. This is something else that's coming out of her body that is really not blood. And I guess today maybe they should be able to look into it if it repeats itself a lot. What's coming out? Check it on a microscopic level and determine what is this. All right. But anyway, so I just wanted to share with you that brown is a machloket, and there appears to be quite a few poskim at least that are machmir with brown.
Just said.
Yeah.
Then microscopic chemical level and not have to deal with the color.
Well, with stain, there's a lot of heterim. Right, there are leniencies.
If you can do brown and you can determine whether or not it is dark, put it through a spectroscope. So theoretically, you don't have to care about all.
Right.
And determine.
Yeah. So first of all, you have to make a determination how reliable is this. Obviously, if something is very, very reliable, it's expert, then it definitely counts. It can count, and we do use expert opinion. We've come across it, with doctors and so forth. Royal Machmas Tashmish can cure it and so forth. So I would venture to say that under certain circumstances, if something is easily resolved through technology, we can obviously use it. It's only as a result of our ignorance that we're being machmir. So if there's a way that we can overcome that with certainty, then we should. Yeah. Now, what if it is blood? The problem is it can become, what if it is blood, but, it has a different color. So, even then, it's not a problem. So the real question really now is not always whether it's blood or not, whether it's if this coloration is tameh or not. That's really the bigger issue right now. Well, obviously, if something is totally not blood, then we're not going to even worry about it. Even if it would be red. But as the poskim say, since we're not experts, once we see something coming out of her body that resembles blood, it already presents itself as a problem. If somehow we can eliminate that, we know for sure that this color has nothing to do with red, then yes, I think you're very right. Then it should not be a problem anymore. All right. What other colors would you like to suggest? Gray. So we were saying that midoraisa, black is Tomeh, according to most places. The Rashba is one of the only ones that says that it's the Rabbanan. Black, according to the majority of Rishonim, is that it's Tomeh Doraisa. So what about if it would be light black? Well, in the same way that we're machmir with light red, different shades of red, we're also machmir, restrict with different shades of black. But if it's really gray, then it appears to be, I think it's a shach, or similar to what the shach wrote. The shach writes that you have a situation sometimes that white is no longer white, but it has become a little bit darker. It still remains in the category of white, even though that white has become darker. When you buy paint and you ask for white, they say, do you want antique white, pearl white, Navajo white? There's different shades of white, right? So some are darker. So based on what the shach says is a white can remain a white even though it has become darker. A white that has become lighter or has become darker remains white. So gray, if it's really gray, should not be a problem because that's what it could be. But if it's a black, a shade of black, it would not be a gray. It would be just another shade of gray, which may be a problem. Again, depending on where you find it, how much of it you see. And that's why experience can make a difference in determining if this black is really a problem or not. Otherwise, as far as we know, from what the poets can tell us, black liquid is, or black stain can be a problem, in the same way red is, unless somehow we can eliminate it. And that's why experience helps. All right, pink. Based on what we've covered so far, what would you say about pink? Yeah, the color, I think it's a tablecloth. Pink is red. It's a shade of red. So pink would be machmir. Pink is tomeh. All right, I think that takes care of the various kinds of shades and various colorations.
Have some of these colors coming out? I mean, you don't hear of these.
No, not really. Not really. But it could happen. It could happen. Have you ever seen somebody vomit green liquid?
Yes.
It comes from the bile.
When I was 5. Bad stomach?
It's from the bile.
Okay.
Yeah. It happened to me once. Yeah. Anyway, there is some green liquids in the body. Yeah, I'm relating it to that. I'm not saying that a woman will necessarily see it, but there are various shades of different liquid body, but perhaps not so often. So if you do see something and you wonder what is it, there's a good chance that this may not even be blood. She was making pizza and ketchup got in there, or she was putting on her lipstick, and I don't know. And has nothing to do with her body at all. When we talk about stains, we'll get into that. All right. The next thing we need to figure out is about colors that change. It was one color yesterday, and now it's a different color. What should our approach be? Can a color go from Tomeh to Tahor, and the reverse, from Tahor to Tomeh? The Chacham Tzvi, I saw, brings down that we always go by the time it exits the body. If upon exit from the body, it is considered Tomeh, it will be Tomeh. Even though later on, it's clear. Or the other way around. If it came out and it was Tahor, and later on somehow it became darker, that ordinarily we would be machmir, it's Tahor. That's what the Chacham says. Not everybody agrees with that, of course. The Yavetz, the Shach, the Taz, and some say even the Bach are machmir. Once it's Tomeh, it's Tomeh. There are some poskim who are lenient. Bach, I think may say that you have to wait till it dries. We don't hold like that because we don't wait till it dries. If we can pretty much see it right away and it's clean, then it's clean, according to the Chacham Tzvi. Or according to the Shach and Taz, if you see something that's tameh, it will remain so. We don't have to wait till later on.
Well, so, something that's tameh.
Apparently, based on this.
If later on turns tameh, that's what the Chacham Tzvi would.
No, but the Chacham seems to be saying also something similar, that if you go Basar the Yetzia.
Yeah.
So if in the beginning it's Tahar, then it doesn't become Tameh later on.
According to him.
According to him.
Because it could.
I think there's quite a few that would disagree with him. Yeah. On that
but
point.
If it's Tameh.
Then though everybody there appears to be in agreement with that, you don't wait. Yes.
And if after some time it now looks Tahor, would they change it also Tameh? What about Tahor? It came out to Tameh. 2 hours later, Tahor.
No. At least there are some points that say yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I did see a couple of points that say that if something came out Tameh, but later on we see that it's become Tahor. It becomes Tahor, but I don't think we go like that. I think based on what the Shach and Taz say, even the Chacham Tzvi, once something has been determined to be Tameh, it stays so. It doesn't change its status later on. Especially when you're not required to wait. We don't see anywhere that that's a requirement to wait. Okay, now speaking about when to see. When is the best time to see, to make a difference, night or day? From the Gemara itself, it's not clear what the conclusion is. There's various ideas that are presented in the Gemara, in two different Gemaras. It appears to be that obviously there may be a preference for the day, but that's because back then they were so into discerning the various colors and shades that they needed a lot of light. And therefore the question came up, can we use starlight? Can we rely on the light, the little light that we have at night, to distinguish the fine shades? But today, the Poskim writes, since we don't really distinguish between shades of red anyway, and we're just living with green and yellow or white, then it doesn't make a difference whether you see it at night or during the day. You hopefully will be able to see green, yellow, white versus red, or something close to red and white. But back then, that question made a difference. So that question was relevant then. Today, that question is really not so relevant. Nevertheless, the Aruch HaShulchan says that it's definitely better to check, have more light during the day. And especially today that we have electric light, it could be that with a lot of electric light, then the night is pretty much similar to the day. I thought so too, but I saw in the Shevet HaLevi who says, no, not necessarily so, because fluorescent versus incandescent light can produce different results sometimes. So you have to be extra careful, he says, and somehow turn them both on. Or perhaps I would suggest looking at it in both kinds of light makes a difference, because some light does tend to darken or make it lighter, whatever it is that you're looking at. So that was an interesting point that the Shevet HaLevi brings down, that the lighting can make a difference sometimes. Many times it doesn't. And sometimes the woman has to know right away at night. You can't wait till the morning. She has to know. Sometimes you don't have a chance to wait. So we can be lenient. We can check at night as long as you have enough, of course, lighting to make that decision. What's interesting is that the Mechaber doesn't bring it. The Tur doesn't mention it about checking day or night, even though it is discussed in the Gemara. The question is raised in the Gemara. So someone has said, since the Mechaber or the Tur do not mention it, it means that they're okay with it. Checking at night, as long as you have sufficient light, would not pose a problem. Especially if you have electricity. And if you have electric light, that should not be an issue then. All right. The Mechaber added, as we saw before, that as far as the consistency or the thickness of the blood were not, that does not change the halacha. In other words, if the color is tohar, even though the blood is thick, even though she felt it coming from the makor, she checked right away, she's still clean. Once the color is deemed to be a clean color, the thickness of it does not matter. What's interesting, however, there's a question that's raised as follows. What happens if she checked herself with, a piece of cloth, and she lost it? It's no longer around, and she doesn't recall if the color on it a reddish kind of color or not. So it's not before us. What do we do now? So in the Sefer Binas Adam, I saw he brings down that it's Asr. You have to be Machmer, Misafek, it's Asr, and I think the Aruch HaShulchan writes the same. There's a Marsham that is lenient with it. But, if you have a question that can come up, a woman has to save that cloth to show it to a rabbi who can check it for her. It could happen that she lost it. It could be a problem, especially if she recalls. It looked like it could be a little red, I'm not so sure, but it looked like it was leaning towards it. Then she would have to be machmer, perhaps. No. We're not talking about the consistency here. We're talking about that she checked herself with a cloth and ate, and she recalls the color. The consistency is not a question here. And she says, well, you know what? I thought it looked like it was a little red, but I'm not sure. It's not here. We may have to be machmer with her. Anyway, that leads us to the next seif. The next seif is a very interesting short seif that no longer deals with the problem of color, but it deals with the problem that we're already familiar from the past, and that's remember the famous nemanas? Nemanas, whether it was in Basar of Taaruvot and nemanas in Hilchas Niddah. The thing about nemanas with Hilchas Niddah is that we're not going to ask a goy, a chef. We're going to ask the woman, or we're going to rely on the woman herself. Yeah. And what did we say all along so far? That in Hilchas Niddah, the woman does have some nemanas, at least some. It says Basar law. We learned it from a Beferish pasuk that she should count for herself. She should count. We trust her. Yes, apparently the Torah trusts her. In certain areas, the Torah trusts her, so she has nemanas in certain areas. So, let's say a woman comes to the rabbi and says, look at this cloth. You see this coloration? This color resembles what I saw the other day. What then?
Well, that's a little bit of a different wherewithal.
Oh, very good. Very good.
To be able to follow.
Oh, exactly. So here we have several questions. Not so much about her being trustworthy, but whether she has that ability to distinguish, or to compare, I should say. This is just like that. So that's the first question. There's two issues in Sif Beis. Ne'emenes isholoma kazera iti. She is ne'emenes to say, I saw something like this, v'bativ, and I lost it. So this is not the case that I presented before. She had an aid. She recalls it being close to red. She's not sure, but she doesn't have anything. Right? That was the question I presented here. She thinks it was, but she's not sure. It was close to red. Whatever. Here she brings us something, and it's not red. So ne'emenes isholoma kazera iti v'bativ. And if what she's showing us, we can see it, is green or white, it's clean. But if she brought us dam, red, and we pretty much determined that it was tameh, or even if we had some doubts about it, whether it was tameh or not, or tor. And then she says something else. Chacham ploni, this one rabbi, once upon a time, when he saw something similar to this, said it was okay. And then we don't retry. Then we won't rely. We do not. In the second example. So what's the second example? The second example is, it came to a chacham's attention that, he's being brought something which he sees appears to be dam tomeh, or even if he has a doubt whether it's tameh or not, but he sees it in front of him, and he has a suffix if it's tameh or tahor. And she says, you know what? By the way, when I had a similar situation in the past, another chacham said that this, like this, is tahor.
What if she says tameh?
And there's no question here.
No, we don't.
No, that's fine.
We rely on her to say tameh, but
well, yeah. Basically, we have a suffix, and we may have to be machmer. We have to be machmer, yeah. But that's a good. What you're saying is an important point for another reason, and I'm going to get to that next. Right now, we have two separate kinds of scenarios in Sif Beis. One is she doesn't have her original cloth, and she brings something similar, and she says, you know what? What I saw last time is exactly the same thing like that. So the Mechaber says ne'emenes. In that case, she's believed to say she saw something like this, she lost it, and therefore if what we see in front of us is a clean color, and she says it's exactly the same thing what I saw in the other aid, in the other cloth, right? This is the same thing. Is this okay? And they say, well, for sure, this is okay. Well, then that is okay too.
Who's
In other words, she's asking, this time she's asking.
Whose drum is okay too?
The Chacham. The Chacham is going to say, all right, you don't have it, but what was it like? Well, it's exactly like this color. She shows a color. She shows cloth with that color. And she says, that one was the same like this. We rely on her, that this, as long as this color is tar, of course that one is tar, and we say that she's not lying, and she has the ability to compare.
To distinguish colors and shapes. This is like the other one.
That's what the Mechaber says. In the first scenario, she's trusted to say that this is exactly the same thing as what I saw last time.
Last time or what I saw?
What I saw. In other words, what I saw
This is for
with
this
the one,
time.
for the one. No, she's not really asking. She's asking about the one she lost.
Right. And the one
She's
she
not.
lost is
She's
the
not
one right
asking
now.
No, she's not necessarily. I failed to maybe explain.
She checked, she lost
I failed to explain,
Yeah.
and that is why you raised your question. I didn't really realize it. Right now she's not necessarily asking for a present situation,
Oh.
because then what you're saying is right. She doesn't know what the outcome will be. So we failed to I guess communicate properly. What she's doing right now is just showing something for comparison purposes, not necessarily to receive a halacha, a ruling for a situation that she has now.
So then Tommy or Tower.
With this one right here, yes.
Yes, I wouldn't. Or you
No, I
saying-
would not conclude if what she's showing me is Tameh or Torah necessarily, because what she's showing me is just a color on a cloth.
What for?
I don't remember what I saw there. I don't have it in front of me, but what I saw there looks like this color, what I'm showing you now.
Why is she telling me? What's
No,
there?
no, she's asking them, is that Tameh or Torah? Well, we don't have it here. Well, let me grab something that looks just like it. Let me show you something that looks just like that.
And that you're talking about, what
Is
kind of that
green,
is
is green or...
Why would she be going on this question?
Right.
Why would she be going? She needs to know now.
It just happened last night. She lost it.
Oh, so it
So
is for a current state.
It is for a current question that is relevant immediately.
Okay.
But what we're looking at, what she's bringing us,
Whenever I rule on that, or I will rule on that,
Right.
is going to dictate this right now.
that's correct. That's
So there's
still
no-
true. In other words, that's still going to determine her
Since she
status.
doesn't know the outcome.
Right. You're right. Yeah, you're right. That's still. I guess it's still going to make a difference. In other words, what the ruling is. Yes, obviously.
But there are
Yes.
people who have more
Right.
artistic thinking shades,
Yeah.
especially if you
Right.
you don't know.
Right. Yeah. So that's what the first scenario, the psak is that we trust that she knows to compare. It's not in front of us, right? She has some nemanas from the Safra law. We don't assume that she's making a big mistake in her comparison. But what about the second din? The second din, she says, she comes and brings it to us. And she says, oh, by the way, I had something similar to this last time. And the Chacham said it was Torah. Then we don't rely on her. Why not? Because here we have the problem in front of us. There's already a reusa. The problem, the reusa, is already in front of us. In the first scenario of the seif, the problem is not in front of us. So we rely on her comparisons.
What? Right now she's showing me the one that came from her
Right.
body
So
now.
right. So it's
So what do I-
chazek. It's chazek dam lefanenu. In other words, the problem has arisen right now, and even if the chiddush is even if we have any doubt about it, that's the chiddush. And obviously, they can tell her the halacha however they want, and especially if it's clear, what difference will it make? But it chazek, the isur is chazek lefanenu. We have it in front of us. We can determine right now what it's like. So what she says about how this was dealt with before does not matter at all.
What's
Is that likely to confuse her? Making a ruling now.
The ruling is, remember,
No,
there's a suffix. Let's take the case of suffix, not the case where it's clear to us.
No,
It's clear to us we don't care what she says. It's clear to us.
She moved to another.
Right.
Let's assume for a moment. And it's the Chacham in the second city.
Yeah.
And they give her this.
Right.
Is this going to confuse her? She have to come like almost every month?
No, first of all, hopefully she doesn't have to come a single time and too often with such a problem. Hopefully she doesn't have that problem. But in this case, it happened that on 2 or 3 occasions she saw something like that, and she claims that in the past she asked. Where in reality, it could be that she never asked. Just that she herself has a suffix, and she thinks it's Tahor.
Now let's say she did ask. Could be she does.
Could be she has, no, yeah.
And she's bringing now a color to
Right.
a rabbi. She's bringing
Right.
now a color, and she says, I want to suck on this color. And incidentally, last time I asked on the same color someone else, he said I'm tahor.
Right,
So now, when she's making it,
right.
what is this statement supposed to, which we then say it does not accomplish? What is it supposed to accomplish? It's supposed to outweigh here that she's asking right now. It's going to do. What is it supposed to accomplish? She brought him a ketef. Now he says, let's say, I'm not quite sure. I have to think about it. And she says, well, there was another chacham who said da da da. Now her relating, he said with respect to a symbol, what or color, what is that supposed to?
That if there's any doubt,
Yes.
if there's no doubt, we can make
No,
that.
if there is any doubt, there is doubt.
Right, because if there's no doubt, we're making that determination right now.
Right, so
But
there is
Chiddush is when there is a doubt, that we will not rely on her testimony.
No, but what is that? What was it supposed to accomplish?
That perhaps we can rely on that this kind of a situation that
So is the Halacha saying we don't rely?
we don't rely
Or
on
she's
this.
not meant?
Well, it's almost the same thing, no?
Well, that depends on what was supposed to accomplish. Was supposed to accomplish that I should rely?
Look at it. Let me read you the Taz. The Taz says, why don't we rely on her?
Okay.
If Yishefshar sheyesh la safek, that she has the doubt, the Savra shehuta, and she thought that it was clean, right? Kivan sheyesh reusa lefanenu shegam lanu yesh safek, because we also have there's a reusa here, and we also have a safek about it. So she says, you know what? I remember it was clean from the past. Is it true what she's saying, that she was told, or maybe she's making up the story, or I shouldn't say making up, or making the assumption that it's tahar in her own mind, because she sees that we have the suffix, right? In other words, it's not necessarily 100% true. Whereas in the first scenario, all she's doing is, there's nothing is before us, there's no reusa, there's nothing in front of us, so there's less of a, how should we say, a chazaka here, and we rely on her to make comparisons. This is like that.
I'm very surprised about that, by the way. I'm
Right,
very surprised because
right.
if you
Right.
the studies that reports,
Right,
and eyewitnesses are from memory,
right,
two separate and distinct factors of testimony. Both the eyewitness people see something. Right now they saw it. What they saw, things.
you know what? That's why there's a diyun, there's a discussion in the posting. If it's a whole big discussion, can a woman rely on when she sees something? Oh, this is the same thing that I once asked.
Exactly.
There's a whole question about that.
Yes, because there are two questions actually.
Yeah.
One
Yeah.
is, and if she just saw it right now,
Can
saw
she
it.
on her own without asking?
Right.
Okay.
But there are two questions here. One is if two tamim next
Right.
to each other. Yeah.
Right.
Well, we know from eyewitnesses that it's something right now they saw it this very second in front of the story completely.
Yeah.
wrong.
Anyway, the halacha with that is that a woman should not make that decision herself. She has to ask a chacham. She cannot assume, like you said, that what she sees now is what she saw and showed last time. She has to show it to a chacham again. The only difference is that in the first case we don't have it in front of us. That's the only big difference. Where we give her some nemanas. The other question is, okay, if she does not completely rely on her own memory, in other words, that she has to trust and she asks a chacham, but what about can she ask her husband? That's the other question. If a woman, we say, cannot rely on her own to make the decision on her own, that what she sees now is what she saw, what she was told last time, can she ask her husband? Which is a different kind of question. And the halacha is that she can. She can ask her husband, as long as, of course, he knows a little bit about this. And even though a husband may be nogea bedavar, and whenever there's negias, we don't trust him if it's his chazak isura. So if there's a question about whether the mikveh was good or not, whether her tevilah was good or not, we cannot use his judgment. That case, some say at least, we cannot. It's also machlokes, because over there she's tmeya. She's already tmeya. It's chazak isura. Was the mikveh kosher or not? Was the tevilah okay or not? Was the chatzitza there? Was there a problem with her immersing in the mikveh? That the husband cannot make the decision. We don't allow him to make it. But in the case of judging the color, looking at this and saying this is completely okay, as far as I know from halacha, he can be trusted. Now, obviously, a man has to be careful too, even though he would love for his wife to be clean. We're talking about a major potential problem here. It's really tmeya. So, as far as nemanas, we believe him. But once there's chazak isura, it becomes a little bit more complicated. Can we rely on the husband or not? But if she has a question, she for sure should not make the decision. The only question was, in the first scenario, was she doesn't have it in front of her. The Reusa is not here. Where the Reusa is here, where she does bring it to us, but she says, you know what? He said it was okay last time, and we have a suffix here. Well, we have a suffix. Maybe she has her suffix herself, and she never really spoke to anybody. Just thinks that it's okay. Then, of course, we don't trust her account of what happened in the past, and hopefully we should be able to make our own determination if we have it in front of us. The big question is if it's not in front of us. So the first case that I mentioned was where she doesn't have anything at all. She doesn't even have anything to compare it. It looks like there's some person who are machmir, because she does recall it resembled perhaps something that looked like red. Well, we're going to be machmir if we don't have anything to go by. But if she says it looks just like this, I can tell you for sure it looks just like that, then she does have nemanas. But in the second case, there's a reusa. We ourselves have a suffix, or we can clearly see that it's done. We cannot just rely on she was told somewhere else. You know, if it's in front of us, then the nemanas is no longer as good, because we see in front of us, we see the problem, and therefore we don't need ketem when we have the ketem in front of us. Yeah, in front of us. No, but the chiddush was even if there's a suffix, that's the chiddush.
Yeah, but even if there's a suffix, but right. Is it about a different cannot right. replace?
In that case, we don't really say that she can easily compare, because that comparison is not relevant.
That's not the talk, because we don't have the other ketem.
No, I'm saying even in her memory, to judge based on what she recalls or what she was told, we don't use that ability of comparing. It doesn't matter anymore.
When did we use it? We're supposed to be judged.
Was not here.
No longer exists.
No longer exists.
So then I don't have anything. I don't have any option. I know there is a ketem.
Exactly. No option.
I can't see the one that there is.
Right. In here, there is, of course, an option. Okay.
Now, what if she comes and she's the ketem that I had that I looked like this one here that I'm presenting to you? Months ago said it was okay.
No, we're not.
Combination of the two.
Yeah, well, obviously if you go ask somebody else, you should always ask the same person. The thing is that obviously sometimes a woman is in a different city,
so she's
right?
In a different city?
And because of that, it came out like that she had to ask a question. And sometimes it's complicated, it's a suffix, and could be that her personal situation was looked into by a chacham, and that is why her testimony or her story is a little bit important, because, you had this problem before, and this is what you were told. So we listen to her, but is it going to make a difference? No, not necessarily, not if we have the problem in front of us. Now we don't have a comparison cloth, we have the real problem in front of us. We have the real reusa. So her nemanas does not really add too much. On the contrary, we say that there's some room to doubt her, what she's saying. Her nemanas is a lot weaker.
Because why is she brother cloth, this other ketem, verbally? Why did she introduce the other ketem when we have that we're discussing here, that we're to rule on, right in front of us, the ketem?
Well, that's what she has right now.
No.
In the second scenario?
She brought us the one that she collected there.
Right.
Okay, we have it in front of
us.
Now I have a doubt.
Right.
Okay, I have a doubt.
Right.
Why is she telling me about this other who saw a similar and moved? Why?
So that's what the Taz was explaining, that she really didn't.
Even if she did, why is she why is she introducing this thought? Yeah. Because she's trying to get a certain result.
Well, obviously, right.
Right. So once she comes in with getting a certain result, then I can no longer trust her, because when she comes with a comparison thing and says it looked like this, but she's not giving me a prejudice regarding the result. She doesn't know what my judgment will be.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
She's not coming as an interested party. But here she's coming
this
is what I want to hear from you.
You definitely can say that, because that was the whole explanation given in the first scenario, when all she's doing is comparing.
Right. She's not giving me a bias as to how to rule.
This one is a little bit more of I guess you can call it a bias, or more of a...
Here she's coming with the result, with a judgment. She's not coming with
the Poskim called it, simply called it a reusa. In other words, her introducing evidence or information is really no longer acceptable, but for the reasons that you can say. I mean, the nemanas there is already lacking, because we have it in front of us, so it doesn't help us. If a person would have nemanas, it would be held then, right?
He's reporting is the judgment of Chacham,
right,
and not the kind of color the ketem.
Yes, and that is already a problem.
Different thing.
It's a whole different thing. Very true. Okay, we'll continue with